So good evening, everyone. I am Dr. Bhavna Sirohi. On behalf of me and Dr. Shona Nag from Nag Foundation, I welcome you all. And I'm extremely grateful for Dr. Sunita Nareddy from Apollo Hospitals, Hyderabad. She's an infectious disease expert. I know we've designed this information leaflet for our patients with cancer, especially solid tumors, about COVID vaccine. I will put this on the chat box now, but if you have any questions, after Dr. Nareddy has spoken about the vaccines, I know I get every day at least 10 to 15 queries about the vaccine, which vaccine, if you've had an infection, should you have it, not have it, and after you've had it, when can you have chemotherapy or not have chemotherapy? So, Dr. Nareddy, we are really looking forward to listening to you. And I'll direct the questions after your talk based on them at the chat box. Thank you.
So shall I share my screen?
Yeah, sure, please.
Can you see that? Okay.
Yes, we can.
So hello everybody. I will try to keep this as simple as possible. If I'm going a little too technical, just stop me. Okay. So a couple of things that we'll try to cover today is talk a little bit about what in general vaccines are, what in general COVID is, specific vaccines available for COVID, and try to understand the differences between these vaccines. So what do we know about COVID? I think this is pretty much like most people can answer this much better than doctors at this point. We all know that COVID-19 is a virus, and most people do develop a mild illness without any special treatment. Though unfortunately, everybody seems to be getting at least 7 to 10 medications, which are usually not required. So for most people, there's not, you just need a symptomatic treatment. However, older people and those with other medical problems can develop serious illness. And we are seeing now some younger people who have not been vaccinated also coming down with serious illness. Unfortunately, we do not know the denominator very well. So it looks like when somebody is getting a serious illness, it's a huge thing, which we are not seeing in reality, seeing the real picture, because we are not seeing the denominator. And how do you prevent it? There are 2 different ways you can do. One is a behavioral technique and the other is vaccines. Of course, the behavioral techniques are very important, where you try to make sure that you primarily take care of your droplets and do a proper cough etiquette, and wear a mask when you're outside. And outside. Okay. And hand hygiene is important. So those main things are cough etiquette. And what is vaccination? Vaccination is basically a simple, safe and effective way of protecting people against harmful diseases before they come into contact with them. It basically uses the body's normal defense mechanisms, the natural defense mechanisms, and builds that defense mechanism to specific infections, and that can be any different infections. For example, you take the flu shot for the influenza infection, or the tetanus vaccine to prevent tetanus. These are the usual ones that most people are familiar with. There are several other vaccines, like in children we give the DPT and so on. Vaccines basically train your immune system to create antibodies similar to what your body would have behaved if you had the disease. So that's the reason why you do develop some side effects. However, because vaccines contain only killed or weakened forms of the germs like virus or bacteria, they do not cause the disease or put you at risk of its complications. Most vaccines are given by an injection. some by mouth, like the polio, oral polio drops, and some that can be sprayed into the nose. Now, vaccine technology, if you look at it, there are different ways you can make vaccines. You can use the whole of the virus or the bacteria and create a vaccine with that, or you can use partial genetic material, or you can use something called a subunit that's used to trigger the immune system. I'm just trying to briefly explain to you what these technologies are. So we'll go into each of these. When you talk about a whole microbe, say for example, a virus, if you can inactivate the virus, where you take the virus which is causing the bug disease, and you remove the properties that will cause the disease, and so that's called an inactivated virus, and that virus is used to create the vaccine. Then you have the live attenuated vaccine, which is typical example is the oral polio virus or the MMR vaccine, where you use the whole live virus, slightly modify it and give it. And with the live attenuated virus, you get a very good immunity, but unfortunately, because it's a live virus, you can sometimes get the disease also from the vaccine. Again, we don't have too many of these viruses. Like I told you, we have the oral polio or the MMR and chickenpox as well. And we have viral vector vaccine, where you take a different virus, not the one that you're looking for. The typical example here would be your Covishield, where you take an adenovirus vector in the Covishield, which is a completely different virus. You take part of the COVID virus bit into the adenovirus and make the vaccine. Okay. So inactivated vaccine, basically, I think we covered this. I'm going to the next slide. Okay. So vaccine, the subunit approach, the subunit vaccine is one that only uses the very specific parts of a virus that the immune system needs to recognize. It doesn't contain the whole microbe or use a safe virus as a vector. The subunits may be proteins or sugars. Most of the vaccine in childhood schedule are subunit vaccine, like the DPT vaccine, diphtheria, tetanus, and pertussis, or the meningococcal vaccine. These are subunit vaccines. The other vaccines that you can use is the mRNA or the mRNA vaccine that you heard about with the Pfizer or the Moderna. That is where you use the genetic approach, where you're using the nucleic acid. Okay, unlike the regular vaccine approaches that uses the weakened or dead whole microbe or parts of one, a nucleic acid vaccine just uses the genetic material that provides the instructions for specific proteins and not the whole microbe. So this is the latest technology that's working, and it's a very useful technology, because with this technology, you can make large amounts of vaccines rapidly. And you can also re-engineer the vaccines quickly. Normal vaccine production is a very long process. With using the RNA or the DNA, you can really constrict that time to make the vaccines rapidly. Okay. So we have DNA vaccine or the mRNA vaccine. Basically, in mRNA, the DNA is turned into a messenger RNA, which is a replicating RNA, and that is used as a blueprint to make proteins. Okay. So the nucleic acid vaccine delivers a specific set of instructions to our cells, either as DNA or mRNA, for them to make a specific protein that we want our immune system to recognize or respond to. Okay. So the nucleic acid approach is a new way of developing vaccine. Before the COVID-19 pandemic, we had very little bit of experience with this, except for like a Ebola vaccine. And now we are using this. This technology is fast becoming a preferred technology. Okay. So what are the current vaccines that we have currently available for COVID-19? So one thing that we have to remember is the best vaccine is the one that is available to us at this point. Don't think that you're going to get one more later, because at this point we are at a stage where the 3 vaccines that we have currently in the country are pretty much equitable. They're not too different from each other. Okay. So the some of the vaccines that we have here with us are the Sputnik and the Covishield, which is made by the AstraZeneca. Hopefully, we will get the mRNA vaccines, Pfizer and Moderna soon. We also have the, I think I have a typo here. We have the Covaxin as well, and the other vaccines that are available in the around the world includes the Johnson and Johnson vaccine and Novavax, CanSino and Sinopharm. Sinopharm is the China one. So these are some of the vaccines that we have. The Pfizer vaccine is pretty much approved by most organizations. The Oxford AstraZeneca, that's a Covishield, is also fairly, it's been assessed, and most of the studies are done for this, and approval is there. Janssen and Janssen also is available. Again, Novartis, all of these are approved ones, the Moderna. Okay, I'm going to skip this slide because we don't have these. These are the other ones that are in the pipeline and will come to us at some point. So trying to understand the differences between the vaccines. So one thing you have to remember, any vaccines that are given, they prevent the severity of disease, not necessarily the disease itself. So you can get a mild disease. When WHO gave the instructions for the companies to make vaccines, the target that they had was, if possible, give it in a as an intranasal, because that's an easier way to give. But injectable was okay, either intranasal or injectable. And the efficacy rate, they were looking at least a 50 to 70%. Actually, I think 50% efficacy rate was what they were looking at, so that the vaccine can be rolled out. Now, that was what the WHO mandate said, but every single vaccine that we're talking about has an efficacy rate of 70% and above. When you look at slight differences in the vaccine efficacy, you have to remember that when you analyze a lot of data, and depending on the amount of disease that was present at the time that the vaccine was studied, one or two cases will skew your data significantly. So a slight difference between 70 or 80 or 90 would not make a huge difference in the final thing, as long as majority of the population is vaccinated. So when you talk about the Pfizer or the BioNTech vaccine, it's an mRNA vaccine, and the efficacy is close to 95% with this, and FDA has given it as emergency use authorization. And with this, they've noticed that greater than 89% effectivity was there in preventing people with health conditions like diabetes and obesity from developing COVID-19 symptoms. Okay. 2 doses are required, 21 days apart, or it can go up to 6 weeks also. And some protection was, a significant amount of protection was provided after the first dose itself. So in fact, they're talking about, can we just delay the second dose, because anyway, you're getting protection with the first dose. This is approved for anybody 16 years and above. A few untoward events were noted, usually mild ones, but anaphylaxis also was seen as in a fair number of people. Okay. I'm mentioning this because I'm hoping that in future we are going to get it as well. Okay. In terms of mutations, they found that it was effective against the UK strain, the B117. But in terms of the South Africa strain, it was not as efficacious. Moderna vaccine is another mRNA vaccine. It's also in similar efficacy range. And it was again about close to 90% efficacious in people who had other comorbidities. And here this vaccine is given 28 days apart, or it can go up to 6 weeks if required. And this vaccine is approved for people who are 18 years. Now, why are they saying 16 and 18 different vaccines? That's because the studies were conducted in these people. Again, even this vaccine has some untoward effects, like usually minor ones, like pain, fatigue, headache, muscle pain, chills, and so on. A few serious problems were found in 1 in 300,000 cases. Typically, anaphylaxis is what they were reporting. And in terms of the mutants, there may be some protection against some of the mutants, but it is still being evaluated. The Johnson & Johnson vaccine is a slightly different version. Again, Why am I talking about this? Because this has a little bit more effective on the mutant strains. So it is close to 70% effective for preventing the symptoms, but significantly works well for severe illness, which is what we need to. And this is also approved vaccine. But there were some concerns because with the side effects, and they're analyzing this because they did find some people developing thrombotic events. This is advantage with this, it's a single dose vaccine. Okay. And there was also a debate whether we need to give second dose at some point later. So this is approved in people who are 18 and above. Should not be taken by people who have had any vaccine, should not be taken by people who have had reactions to vaccine subunits. And similarly, this also has side effects including pain, headache, fatigue, muscle pain, chills, fever, and nausea. Again, one of the issues with this that they're evaluating is the development of thrombus formation. And they had some other side effects as well, like rash and bruising present with this vaccine. The Janssen vaccine is known to have better efficacy and with the South African mutant, where this can potentially be advantageous because that's evading most of the other vaccines. Now let's come to the vaccines that we have. The Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine that we are making ourselves here, the Covishield. This is being distributed in a lot of countries, including UK, Scotland, and a bunch of other European countries as well. Advantage with this is the strict guidelines in terms of storage requirements for the mRNA vaccines is not there with this. That's one of the major disadvantages with the mRNA vaccines, where you have to have very stringent storage criteria, like the Pfizer requiring storage like -70 degrees, Moderna requiring -4 degrees for prolonged periods of time. So these vaccines are better, easier to handle, they are much cheaper, and they can be stored. Now, one of the issues that has been discussed.
Sorry, Dr. Sunita, we can't hear you well. Could you please mute yourself? Those who are Anandi, could you please mute yourself? Sorry, Dr. Sunita, carry on. Sorry.
One of the issues that was noticed with this particular vaccine is they did find some people developing blood clots and low blood platelets, which is called TTS. They are investigating this further. But at this point, the regulators have told that the benefits of the vaccine still outweigh the risks. And a lot of this actually were noticed in young women. So that's one thing that to remember. It's advisable. This vaccine is approved for 18 years and above. It is 2 doses. Now, the initial study was done with 2 doses 4 weeks apart. But what happened was in UK, they decided that the first dose gives an efficacy of about 55%. The second dose gives an efficacy close to 90%. So instead of giving in the population, instead of giving 2 doses for 1 person, if they give 1 dose for 2 people and thereby cover more number of people, in effect, they would get, say if they vaccinated, they would get 110 people getting efficacy. When like if you're talking about 55 people, 55% efficacy, and if you vaccinate 200 people, 110 would actually be having protection. Whereas if you give 2 doses for 100 people, only 90 people would be getting the protection. I'm not sure how well you understand this. So they decided that with that kind of a mathematical logic, they would vaccinate more people in the population with single dose and defer the second dose for 12 weeks. And what they found was actually it worked out better that way than giving 2 doses 4 weeks apart. They were able to cover more people, more efficacy, and in fact, real-time analysis was better, that their efficacy was much better with the first dose. Though the initial trial said 55%, which is why I'm telling that don't just go with the small differences in numbers. The first dose itself gave them a 75% efficacy. So, which is why now India is also saying that give the second dose even up to 12 weeks later. You get a long-term protection by delaying the second dose. And how well does it work with the mutants? It is seen to have worked reasonably well against the UK mutant, and with the South African mutant, it was not very efficacious. We'll skip the Novavax because we're not going to be getting this, I'm presuming. And Covaxin is another vaccine that we have in India. Covaxin is another vector-borne vaccine. And the advantage with Covaxin is that though normally vector-borne vaccines usually have a lower efficacy, in this, thanks to the adjuvant that was used, the efficacy is fairly good, about 90%. And that is given 2 doses 4 weeks apart. Okay. And the Sputnik vaccine, which is just launched today, I believe, in Hyderabad, actually in our own hospital, is a Russian designed vaccine, which is similar technology as compared as Covishield. Both are use the adenovirus vector. Okay. And in Sputnik vaccine, there are 2 doses, and in both the doses, they use 2 different vectors of the adenovirus. Because they use 2 different vectors, the body's reaction to the vaccine, the second dose, becomes more stronger, and they say that it probably works better. And they're actually doing another study right now in Azerbaijan, where they're using Covishield as the first dose and Sputnik as a second dose to see how it would work, and the results of that are still awaited at this point. I think I'm going to stop here. I'd like to thank one of my colleagues, Dr. Sneha Varahala, who helped me prepare the slides, and I'll take any questions. I know there are going to be specific questions regarding the vaccination in cancer patients, which I thought we'll just cover when we answer questions. Let's consider.
Thank you, Dr. Naredi. That was wonderful. Actually, you've covered most of the things. I have some questions that have come to me separately in the chat box. So one of the questions is the RNA vaccines that you talked about. A lot of our patients and healthcare workers have actually had, let's say, both the doses of the vaccines, Covishield or Covaxin, or had just one dose. And whether the RNA vaccines, the efficacy is better. I know there's no head-to-head comparison, but can one mix and match?
Okay, so to answer that question, I believe UK, I think in UK, they're doing this study where they're giving 4 groups of people. One group gets Covishield and Covishield. One group gets Covishield followed by Pfizer. One group gets Pfizer and Pfizer. And one group gets Pfizer followed by Covishield. So they've divided this into 4 groups to see what would happen if you take one vaccine and then a different kind of a vaccine. Okay, so basically Covishield, Pfizer, Covishield and Pfizer and Covishield, the order. So in this one, we only have interim analysis at this point. The interim analysis is looking at only the side effects, because by the time you look at efficacy, it takes some more time, and we don't have that time right now. We just have the interim analysis where we're looking at the side effects. Covishield or Pfizer seems to have a little bit lesser side effects as compared to Pfizer Covishield, which has the highest side effect after the second dose. There was the side effects that they found in this particular group were primarily fever, chills, body aches, myalgias, and so on. So Covishield and Pfizer had about 10% of the people complained of the symptoms. Covishield followed by Pfizer, between around 30% of the people complained of these symptoms. Pfizer Covishield, about 40% complained of symptoms. So more side effects. However, we do not know how it translated with the efficacy. That data will come only with time, because that needs a longer follow-up.
So we still don't know the answer to that.
Don't know the answer to that.
So we should take the vaccine now, the second dose, without without delaying whatever is available. I think that should
just
be
take
the
the second dose at this point.
Great. And also there was a study which showed that, the interval in cancer patients, because of their ability to mount an antibody response, especially if they're on chemotherapy or they're immunosuppressed, should the interval be 8 weeks, 12 weeks, or should we decrease the interval?
See, okay. Immunotherapy or cancer chemotherapy, any of these causes your body's immune response to decrease when you give the vaccine.
Yes.
That is true with any vaccines across the board.
Yeah.
You may or may not mount an antibody response. So when we talk about any other vaccines, we don't necessarily change the schedule. We still stick to the same schedule. Now, when we talk about, again, Covishield or Covaxin, none of these vaccines have data on immunocompromised patients.
Yeah.
They've not included them in the study. So do we have a definitive answer for these questions? We really don't have, because unless it is studied, you don't know. But like I told you, generally when you give vaccines, you mount a better response and a longer response if you actually delay the vaccine interval. So at this point, with the Covishield, I will still probably go with the 12 weeks. Exception being, if my risk for COVID is so high today, then I probably will go, because I'm immunocompromised, I'd rather take it now to get that immediate response than to wait for a longer duration of efficacy.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know if I made that clear.
No, I think that's a very good point.
Confusion.
Especially, I think it depends on the community transmission as well.
Exactly.
Especially
in my community, if the prevalence is very high, then I would rather take the second dose a little earlier than delay it, because it's important for me to get the protection now rather than a longer term protection.
Absolutely. So that's a great point. So a lot of questions, Dr. Naredi, if you want to have a drink in between. I have a question. I have had bilateral, so, breast cancer patients have breast cancer surgery, plus they also have the axillary lymph nodes removed as well. So this lady's had bilateral surgery where she had 4 nodes removed on one side, 10 removed on the other side. Can I get the vaccine on my arm? Because, it's an intramuscular injection. And normally we tell them that, you cannot actually, you should avoid any pinprick, even taking the blood pressure on the side where you've had the surgery.
That's a good question. And I actually am not too sure what the answer should be, but generally, vaccines, when you're giving the vaccine, I don't think it really, it's not necessarily the lymph nodes at that site that are going to generate the immune response. So it should be okay to take the vaccine is what I would assume. Maybe you're a better person to answer this question.
So I have suggested taking it because it's a small needle prick, but I have 2 surgeons in the group. Dr. Sareen, if you want to make a point, or Dr. Manjula, if any of the surgeons would want to make a point as to what they are recommending, because, this is the 3rd time I've had this query. I've asked my colleagues around the world as well. And this question has just popped up as a direct message. So I hope I won't name you. Let us start again, Dr. Naredi, with the questions, because we have about 15-20 minutes. So we were discussing that if the patients have had bilateral nodal dissection, what the recommendation we have been giving is that, they can have the vaccine in the arm because it's a very small pinprick. And so I don't know what, Manjula, do you have has this come to you as a query? Manjula is our breast surgeon at the Proton Center.
Good evening, Dr. Bhavna.
Hi, good evening. So what are you recommending?
So there have been concerns raised regarding this, and as per the guidelines in the US, the Pfizer vaccine can be given also in the anterolateral aspect of the thigh. I could not find a similar mention for the Covishield vaccine, unfortunately, or the Covaxin vaccine, but I'm trying to find guidelines for this as well. But I think if it can be given on the in the deltoid, I think it should be possible to administer it in the anterolateral thigh as well. Shouldn't be a problem. But only the Pfizer vaccine has an official guideline on that.
Yeah. So I think this is what we can suggest as well. But last couple of patients, I think they've had it on the arm, and there's a patient in Delhi who'd already had it, and no issues at all. So, Tilly, what is the rationale, Dr. Nareddy, for recommending it only in the arm and not in the? Is it because there are less of lymphatics and less chance of other infections in the hand than in the leg? That's why we actually don't give chemotherapy in the leg veins. Chances of clot, infections, and all of that are there.
In children, we give vaccines in the thigh, but in adults, we don't recommend it giving in the thigh. I think probably again it's to do with the lymphatic systems is what I'm thinking.
Yeah. So if the lymph nodes have been removed, I think I would go with on the side where the less lymph nodes have been removed. Like if you've had a sentinel node biopsy, I think the question that came earlier was on one side only 4 lymph nodes had been removed. So that is the side that you could have the vaccine. And as Dr. Manjula said, there is data with the RNA vaccine that you could have it in the thigh as well. One of the other questions is that after you've had an infection, a COVID infection, how soon should you get the vaccine? First of all, yes, you should get the vaccine. I think you said that, but how soon after that?
That's a very frequently asked question because everybody faces that. A lot of people face that, especially because invariably people are getting COVID after the vaccine also. And the guidelines actually are all over the place. The latest guidelines by the CDC at least says that because disease itself protects you for a period of time, usually about 3 months, it's better to defer the vaccine 3 to 6 months also. This is for the US where the prevalence is going down because overall vaccine rates are going up. I would not be so confident with our country where our prevalence is still much higher, and generally the disease immunity, we don't know if it lasts beyond a couple of months. So we can give it anywhere from a month, or the earliest you can take the vaccine after the disease is about a month from the time that you were diagnosed. Typically about 2 weeks after you've been feeling well. That is, and you can go as long as 3 months later. However, if you have had a moderate or a severe disease, having received a fair amount of steroids or plasma therapy or immunosuppression, it is better to defer it for a longer period of time, closer to 3 months, because your ability to mount a response is not going to be good.
Okay. So giving plasma therapy would decrease the ability to mount a response? Yes, because you've received antibodies.
What about the second dose? If you've taken
yes, so
Yeah,
Madhu, you asked actually, after, in case I get COVID after my first shot, how much gap should they keep for the second shot?
So if you haven't received vaccine and you're getting the vaccine, then I would rather you can delay it as good 3 months. The confusion occurs because I've taken the first dose and I'm supposed to take the second dose at this point in time, but I'm not able to take the vaccine. That's where most of the people are afraid. If not taken a vaccine, then it's no big deal. I'll just delay it a little longer. So even if you've taken the first dose and after that you develop the vaccine disease, yeah, you want to defer the second dose for a little bit longer, as close to 3 months if possible. And if you want to take it earlier, the earliest you have to wait for at least a month. And if you've taken immunosuppressives, definitely don't take it until 3 months.
For 3 months. So basically up to 2 to 3 months is the time after that they can have the vaccine. Okay, so and then the next, I think we've already discussed whether we can swap the vaccines. Vaccine. So the other question I had, I think I remember I wrote it down, is traveling to vaccination centers, developing COVID, should we? I think the answer to that is yes, you should just wear adequate mask and shield and protection and gloves and wash your hands. Would you agree that they should travel to the
You
vaccine
have to get
center?
the vaccine. Vaccine is very, very important. If you can, try to find the time in the vaccine center where they have the least crowd. But basically, I hope most vaccine centers have taken adequate precautions to space out people, especially now because vaccines are being given only with appointments. Without appointments, people can't go. So the crowding there is also less.
Mhm.
And let's hope that.
Yeah.
And take appropriate precautions. Make sure you have a proper mask on your face and don't take it out while you're there, and wash your hands when you come back.
And one of the questions is, my platelet count is 72,000 post chemotherapy. Can I go for the Covishield vaccination? So if not, what range is good for it?
Similar doubt is with blood thinners as well.
Hmm.
See, blood thinners or low platelets by themselves are not a contraindications for the vaccine itself. It is the concern is the bleeding component. Will I bleed if I take a vaccine? Because it's a poke. When I'm having low platelets, or if I'm on a blood thinner and I get poked, will that result in a bleed? So as long as your platelet counts are reasonable, typically over 50,000 should be fine, but you would like to discuss with your medical oncologist, and you want to warn the people who are giving you the vaccine at the vaccine center. If possible, use a smaller gauge needle and don't rub it. When the vaccine is given, just give the vaccine and take out. Don't rub it in, because that can lead to hematoma formation or a blood clot formation. So similar with the blood thinner, as long as you're on therapeutic anticoagulation, which means you're not on a very high amount of blood, if the blood thinner is not giving you excessive bleeding tendency, and it's in the therapeutic range, you can take a vaccine, but make sure you tell them so that preferably use a smaller gauge needle and don't rub to cause less trauma.
Yeah. So just press it for a few minutes.
That's it. Just
That's it.
gentle pressure, no rubbing in.
No rubbing. And Dr. Sareen had a question that, what are the absolute contraindications to a vaccine? Who should not get it at all?
If you have had a reaction to a vaccine or a component of the vaccine, that would be an absolute contraindication to the vaccine. Pretty much that I don't see any major contraindications for vaccine for adults as such. If you have had anaphylactic reaction prior to a vaccine, most people are scared because there's this quote unquote allergies. If I had allergy by eating fish, I can still take the vaccine. If I had allergy to taking some tablets, medicines, most of the time you're fine. Some of the vaccines have eggs in them, like the intranasal flu shot goes through the egg, chicken eggs when they make the vaccine. So that used to be a concern in the past, but none of these vaccines have issues with eggs, so egg allergy is also not a concern. So yeah, anaphylactic reaction to other vaccines or vaccine components would be a concern.
And the other question is, can a lady trying to become pregnant, can she take the vaccine and then becomes pregnant in 4 to 8 weeks? Is it okay? Is it safe?
See, the vaccines that we are talking about are not live vaccines. Live vaccines would be a concern in pregnancy because the immunity is low. You're at risk for developing a disease from the vaccine itself. Pretty much other than that, most vaccines are theoretically safe in adults, and we've used a lot of vaccines in pregnant women, from your booster Tdap, the tetanus, diphtheria, pertussis vaccine is now universally given in all pregnant women. Influenza vaccine is recommended in all pregnant women. The live vaccines like rubella vaccines is always given pre-pregnancy. These are not live vaccines. So if these are not live vaccines, you should not have a problem. Right now, trials are ongoing in pregnant women, which were not there in the past. So far, the women that have had vaccine during pregnancy don't seem to be having any problems that we know of. Having said that, until the research is done, it's always given with caution. The caution would be risk versus benefit ratio. So if you're trying to become pregnant, and we don't, again, there's no hard and fast rule that you should not take the vaccine. You should, it's a relatively safe vaccine that way.
And now we are giving it to pregnant women as well.
Now we are giving it to pregnant women. So if you're anyway giving it to pregnant.
And also there's a question, how many days after the Covishield vaccination should we go for chemotherapy? So I normally say to my patients is that, most of the patients may have side effects. So I say at least keep about 3 to 4 days gap before they have chemotherapy. What would you suggest?
Depending on the chemotherapy and depending on the disease. If you're going to give vaccine and then give you a very immunosuppressive chemotherapy, then the vaccine efficacy goes down. At the same time, you have to worry about the disease not responding to disease control also. So if the disease is a disease that you can't wait for the wait, then you have to go ahead with the chemotherapy and hope whatever best response you would get.
So this is mainly for solid tumor chemotherapy, mainly breast, GI, lung cancer. So it is not very immunosuppressive.
Unlike the bone marrow transplant where you're giving, or like AML where you're giving a very much higher thing. Yeah, for most of the solid organs, you should be okay.
Should be okay. And even same, I think there's a question about chemotherapy that what duration would you advise patients to know? So what are the... So there was a question about chemotherapy. No. Yes. So I've had the left mastectomy and lymph nodes are removed. I just had a second dose of chemo on 7th of May. So the vaccine could be taken how many days before and after chemo? So again, we suggest that, you can, the best time, most of the guidelines recommend that to have the chemo would be a few days before the chemo is due or a few days after. But a few days before is better because your counts are normal at that time. You are not, your neutrophils are normal. So if your chemo is due, let's say in 2 weeks' time, your counts are likely to be normal. So doing a CBC is very important, a platelet count as well, because chemo can make your platelet counts go down. So we normally suggest do your blood test. If that is okay, you can go ahead with the vaccine. The reason we don't give it immediately after the chemo is because we give steroids as anti-nausea for 2-3 days. So that's the time we recommend not to. And after what duration would you advise patients to undergo surgery? Soon after taking the vaccine, after so that would that be after the vaccine undergoing surgery, would there be any concerns?
If you're going for a surgery tomorrow, I wouldn't take a vaccine today.
Yes.
Any vaccine you can potentially have side effects. If you have a fever, then your surgery is going to be delayed. They'll cancel the surgery. So you want to give a little bit of a gap, like how you said, similar for chemo. You don't want to take it too close to the chemo. Yeah. A few days before the surgery would be fine. In terms of, what was the other question? Surgery and after suffering from COVID, we covered.
Yes. So after COVID, I think usually we give chemotherapy 10 to 14 days after suffering from COVID, because that's when you're less likely to be infective. Same for surgery. What about oral chemotherapy, Xeloda? I think same applies, that you do it towards because you're not taking it continuously. You have your off period, a week off or a 2 week off. So during that period, you can take the vaccine. I think like exactly what Dr. Naredi said, risks versus benefit. You may not mount an antibody response, but I think you should consider taking the vaccine. There are some blood cancers type of chemotherapy where it's not recommended 2 weeks here either side. Can vaccination be taken during periods?
Sure.
Yes, that's not a problem at all. And I think I have covered most of the questions. Yes, there is one question. What are the precautions a heart patient needs to take, or patients who are on blood pressure medication, and which vaccination do you suggest in such a case?
Blood pressure medications by themselves, again, have no major concerns. You can go ahead and take the vaccine. Blood thinners will be there in most cardiac patients. They may be on multiple blood thinners, from aspirin, clopidogrel, or other blood thinners as well. Much depending on the case, maybe they may be on anticoagulation also. So again, if it's aspirin, clopidogrel, no big deal. You just go like any other person and take the vaccine. If you're on anticoagulation, like warfarin, then you want to check with your doctor before you take the vaccine. Ensure your drug is at a giving you therapeutic anticoagulation and not overcoagulated. You're not having your INR very high, and as long as you're under therapeutic anticoagulation, you can take the vaccine under the appropriate precautions, which we just discussed. Take a finer needle and no rubbing after the vaccine.
Yeah, thank you. Which vaccine is better for diabetic patients and thyroid? I think the same applies.
It doesn't make a difference.
Yes, absolutely. I think I'll take one more question because it's 6:57. I know.
Can you please repeat this question, repeat this answer, because I just missed that time. I asked this question.
Sorry, Madhumita ji. I'll just ask Dr. Nareddy to repeat which vaccine to take for thyroid and patients who have diabetes.
Right now, we have 3 vaccines available in the country: Covishield, Covaxin, and Sputnik. Covishield and Sputnik are similar kind of vaccines. They are both vector-borne vaccines. And Covaxin is attenuated vaccine. So either of them would be fine. There is no major differences between the 3 of them at this point that we know of. Whichever is available is what you should take. There may be some reports of slight differences between one from the other, not enough to make a significant difference that I would only pick one and not the other. So whatever is available is what I would go with at this point.
Last question, sorry. I have been advised to get gallbladder surgery. After how many days of second vaccination surgery may be done? I think exactly as we said, after about 3-4 days when the side effects are over. Thank you so much, Dr. Nareddy. Thank you, patients. Our next topic, third Monday of the month, is going to be on holistic needs assessment. I think this topic also has come from you about survivorship. A lot of patients are 1 year down the line, 2 years down the line. What all things you should look out for? What are the signs of recurrence, if there are? What are the concerns about recurrence? And how you should actually holistically assess yourself, and how we should be doing it in our clinics as well. Thank you, Dr. Nareddy. We are so grateful. Absolutely.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
So much. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, River Root, Sachin. I'm really grateful. Thank you for hosting us. Thank you. Thank you.